My name is Mohammed Hassan. Some of you might know me as Mo. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, SC. And today, if we have the good level, that you'll take home to use with you today. So, is it coming in and out, the voice? Yeah. So it's not a theory today. This is an actual working script that you can actually go download and do something with it instantly. How many of you here are actually sysadmins? All right. How many of you teach Splunk in your companies? All right. So something we always struggle with as a former customer, as an SCE, as someone who wants to learn Splunk like everybody else, is how do I get a test environment, a lab environment? And it's always at home, you go look up for old laptops or old Dell hardware and just something very loud in your basement. This will actually solve the problem for you. Right? Just have an audio issue. All right. So the first session, I'm going to skip the legal stuff. I'm going to skip stuff about me if you don't want to learn about me. Nothing really interesting. But the problem we're trying to resolve here is, again, this is something I face personally, and again, most of you have probably seen this, so I wanted to have a solution that's something people can actually use. So again, if you want to test build a test environment, if you want to just work with Splunk without having to learn Docker or VM, you know, if you have a lab environment, and you might have a good lab environment in your company, but they use shared, but then you have to dismantle everything afterwards. So this solution actually is for you. Imagine this. Imagine what you see here on the screen. This is full cluster, fully functioning cluster, multi-site cluster that actually fits in your laptop. If I tell you that this is possible, would you believe me? How many believe me? One, two, not too many believers here. This is actually happens every day in my laptop. I have a MacBook Pro, 16 gig memory. Now if you have a Windows machine or something with a higher memory, obviously I'll run more comfortably. But, and hopefully I'll show you a demo at the end of the day to prove to you that actually really works. I called this Splunk N Box. It was a journey. It took me about 1 year. Again, I was trying to solve a problem for myself. Eventually, I solved a problem for everybody else, like my customers and my colleagues at work. So the reason it's called Splunk N Box, it's just like it says. You can put too many components in one very small box, really, which is your laptop or server if you wanted to. Started with 20-line script. That's the intention. A year ago, when I learned Docker, like, oh, what's a big deal about Docker? Then the more I put into it, the more I discovered this thing is wonderful. So now we're ending up with 4,500 lines of bash script. I never known bash can deliver that much, actually. So I did a Google search one time on how big of the largest bash script out there in the world, and I was only able to find one reference to like 5,000, something like that. So not really sure how accurate that is, but yeah. The script is definitely optimized for Mac OS, so those who are running Mac, and those who, how many familiar with Docker here? All right, good crowd. So a lot of us actually, even within Splunk too, some of people just want to download a demo or something that kind, and then they start messing with Docker and when typing CLI and they miss a switch here and a switch there. And it creates a lot of things back and forth. I'm trying to eliminate all that stuff and just focus on learning the product, you know. Question? Oh, sorry. So your feedback, hopefully when you go home, or even tonight, just go home and download it. Their GitHub link was actually posted in the first page. Or just Google Splunk N Box and you'll find a reference to it. It's very easy to install. I've automated a lot of things. Your installation time might be 5-10 minutes or half an hour, depending on how many packages are missed. But the script actually will attempt to automate a bunch of things for you. The Linux install is extremely easy. The Mac install takes some time because you have to have a bunch of GNU packages. So, some use cases, as I mentioned earlier, it could be used for a classroom or search parties for customers here, or for employees, Splunk employees. So if you have a small, low volume, low performing Dell box sitting somewhere in a corner of the office, you don't need it, just run the script on it, and you probably can bring 20, 30, 50 Splunk containers completely isolated from each other. It have its own IP, and everybody can just log in and have a classroom instantly. Well, within a few minutes, actually. But But that's the promise I have for you. Another use case is when people want to test they want to replicate their production environment, and you're not replicating the load or the user load, but you're actually replicating the configuration. So if you have multi-site cluster or two-site cluster or one single-site cluster, you can just run the script, match your environment, different versions if you have to, and then just play with the configuration. What happens if I change this bucket size? What happens if I do something crazy like replication factor of 10, search factor of 2, and I only have 3 indexers? Crazy stuff like that. So the possibilities really are endless. Once you have this ability to just generate things instantly, you can do wonders with it. So one time I talked to a PS guy, professional services, and those guys are hands-on, not like SCs. We're with customers all the time. So we're talking about clustering, and I told him I built thousands of clusters in my life. He was like, how'd you do that? You're just in a C, you don't build clusters. Sorry about my voice, by the way. I've been talking all day. And I said, Splunk N Box. I build more than 1,000 clusters during the testing process. So it's very, very easy. Just again, click, 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 done. And that's the point I want to drive home to you, that a lot of times when I talk to people about this, they're like, oh yeah, nice, but there's something I have to learn. I promise you that's not the case. The only potential issue that you may run into, your Mac, not even Unix, the Mac laptop may not be ready because you have to install some packages. And again, the script will automate a bunch of that stuff for you. Testing apps, another use case, and hopefully we keep track of time here. Yeah, testing apps, if you, a lot of us download apps in our laptops, single instance, and it works just fine, but when you want to go put it in a distributed environment, it's not the case. You have now an option to do it. I have people who are actually using this for Splunk certification. So again, small footprint on your laptop, and you have an environment you can build and dissect instantly. You can actually test third-party integration. There is a section of the script that allow you to connect to third-party tools like MySQL. So I want to learn how to use DB Connect, for example. I build a cluster, I download a MySQL container, ready to go, learn how to connect them with DB Connect. Those are a bunch of use cases. Questions so far? Why Docker? I don't want to spend too much time in this. We are a Splunk conference, not a Docker conference. But those who are not familiar with Docker, Docker is very, very active community. It's similar to Splunk. There's like energy around it, and people love it, you know. And there's almost like a cult, you know. So it's the process isolation technology is not new actually. It's been out for like 15 years, but Docker made it very easy. Rich APIs, scriptable language now. And that's why it's very famous and very popular. Docker is a Linux, was born in Linux and still a Linux application. So if you go to Windows Docker or Mac Docker, they will be shipped with a single hypervisor layer that emulates Linux. So just remember that. That makes a difference in terms of performance. You can push a lot of more Docker containers. I'm talking about Splunk Docker containers in the Linux box versus a Mac OS. The only difference between Docker and hypervisor, you guys probably seen this. Those who have been around Docker, they've seen it, is the removal of hypervisor layer. That makes a huge difference in terms of impact on the OS. So in my laptop, for example, I only can run 3 VMs, 4, before things start going crazy, while I can do 25, 30 containers easily, comfortably. So huge difference. When I asked the performance guys on Splunk, how does Splunk perform under Docker container versus Splunk running natively? And the answer was, it's almost identical. So, huge win. So, quickly about Docker architecture, is always the CLI piece. That's how you build containers and delete them, and, you know, create them and delete them and modify them. Then you have the Docker daemon, which is where the actual engine actually, and you have images and you have containers. So an image just nothing but a long file, like an OVA file, for example, for in a virtual world. So the image converts to a running Docker. So just remember the distinction between an image and running container. Then a new concept get introduced, the repository, something the VM world or VBox world don't have it. So you have a central repository of all the images. People publish their own images, and there are like hundreds and thousands of those images. If you're new to Docker, you want to learn Docker, I recommend that you seek the official images. So someone like Oracle, someone like Splunk or Microsoft will release an official image. That's nothing to say, that not saying that they're not good images made by regular people, but just play with the official images first and then seek out the other people's images. And then there's a popularity in downloads. When you go to Docker repository, it'll tell you how popular those images are. We actually have our own official image too. I'm going to skip through this. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on Docker. Docker file is how you configure the containers and the images. And okay, so this is a script. What's a big deal here? Again, I spent a year doing this thing, and most of the time was spent on troubleshooting and debugging and checking for errors. Docker is very efficient, extremely efficient. So building a single Splunk container is not a problem. It's easy. One line, you can bring up a container. Building a cluster, Splunk cluster with a container becomes very challenging. One simple fact is everything's coming up very fast, and that will drive your load average very high, and then the things go crazy. So a lot of things I had to do is actually build error checking, and I sometimes throttle the execution. I read your CPU, how many cores you have, how much memory you have, and I do some calculations, and based on that, I will actually sometimes pause the execution of the script until the load average comes down. So a lot of tricks like that to actually effectively build repeat the process continuously, so it doesn't have to fail. Dynamic IP allocation, there's like a mini DHCP activity in that box, so all you have to do when you create a host or a container, you just say, this is the base host name, you call it my host, for example. And then subsequent host will be my host 01, my host 02, so you don't have to worry about that. The same thing with IP addressing. It's always allocated for you dynamically. So all these little things you have to worry about if you're building an infrastructure, you don't have to worry about it actually if you're running the script. A little something different here than if you see articles how to build Splunk containers or even similar product. Sometimes I recommend to you to use port 8000 in the first container and then 8001, 8002, so on and so forth. And then some people came up with a solution like have a reverse proxy there, like Nginx, I guess it's called. But it's a reverse proxy where you don't have to change the ports and everything comes to this reverse proxy. Both solutions were not good to me because one is cumbersome. The other one is I get a performance hit because I have to have a reverse proxy. So what I did is like, well, why don't I just create a bunch of interfaces on the bunch of IPs on the interface and just bind those containers to the interface. And now every container has its own IP. I do not have to have a third layer. So I solved the problem at layer 3 versus layer 7. So again, performance gain. The cluster that get built is completely functioning. You can literally take those and put them in production and it would work. People ask me, can I put this in production? You're on your own. There's no support there. It runs in Windows, WSL, Windows Ubuntu Linux subsystem. Interesting product. I wasn't a big believer of that, but once I've seen it and worked with it, I was really impressed. Microsoft and Conical did a fantastic job bringing this product to market. So you would have native bash environment running on Windows, and the script just runs out of the box. What else? Oh, little things like when I release a new code, and your script actually will check the GitHub, say, hey, there's a new code released, do you want to download? So it's automatic upgrade things, so a lot of stuff like that. All right. There's not much to do to configure the script. The only thing you have to do actually to configure the interface that you're using. The script will attempt to guess something, but you have to manually do it. This is ETH OS X or ETH Linux, depending on the environment you're in. So just make sure you change that. And then the space around you. If you are running in a Mac laptop, you want to stick with IP space that's not shared. And my assumption here is you don't want people to hit your laptop from outside. This is only for you. You don't have enough resources in the laptop. But if you have running a Linux server and you want to make this lab environment, then use a routable IP space like 192 or something like that. So just remember that. That's the only thing actually. Then the default Splunk image, and I keep updating this right now. I do have support for 7.0, just So I don't know how it's going to work, but I do have it. And yeah, so in a scenario, people ask me, how can I test upgrades? Well, yeah, you can. This script will support Linux version 6 for 3, I think, upward. So every single version has an image. So you can just kind of mix and match your environment the way you want it. And any questions? Oh, sorry. Again, there are other configurations. There's like 50 different configurations you can use, but you don't have to if you don't want to. There's 2 different sections in the script: manual configuration and automatic configuration. So this one comes to clustering. If you want to do manual cluster configuration, the only things you can do actually change the host names. I call them host names or Docker container names, and stick with those naming convention: IDX for indexers, search hit, SHEN. The reason I'm saying that, don't divert from this standard, because I use the host names as a way to identify the container. I don't have a clean way of querying Splunk and tell me, what role are you playing? Are you a deployment server? Are you a license master? I haven't figured it out yet. If anybody knows a trick, let me know. Something about the Mac. Remember, Mac performance is it's actually, you can tell the difference between Mac and Linux run. If you're new to Docker and you've seen references to things like VBox or boot to Docker, ignore those articles. Docker moves such a fast pace that this is history right now. This is ancient history. So just kind of quick notes here. Do not run Splunk D locally on the same laptop. You could have to kill that instance. Reason is port collision again. So the script will check for that. If you're running Splunk D, it will tell you, hey, it's running. And if it was standard path /app/splunk/bin, it will kill it. Otherwise, you have to do it manually. What else? This is how I tested this thing. And this is what's so impressive about Docker. The little thing here on the right-hand side, this is my lab. A box, $1,000. And I can push, listen to this, upward of 80 containers. 80 Splunk containers runs comfortably, very comfortably, in 32 gig machine. Nobody can claim that when it comes to VM technology. All right, I think, yeah. So when I do lunch and learns for my customers, all I have to do, hence the name Splunk N Box, I bring this nice Wi-Fi router that can handle traffic, and I bring this tiny box, and here's my lab. Come on, let's log in. And I will have like 50 containers with ready to go, a pre-made environment. No need for AWS Cloud, no need to ask the customer to have their own lab environment, and it works. And this is exactly what I made this script actually. So, or if you don't want to have that, you can just run it in your laptop. But remember, in laptops, multi-site clustering becomes very difficult, and after 25 containers, you'll start seeing performance issues. You need minimum of 16 gig. You can run it in 8, but obviously, the more memory, the more containers you can have. All right, some screenshots. And just in the interest of time, just in case we lose track here, I normally like to have some screenshots of the script. I have recorded run of the script, posted in YouTube, and we'll try to play it in 2x speed, so I'll be commenting on it. But if we miss that, can't even see here, but the top section is a bunch of checks happens, and most of the work went behind the scene is actually around Mac OS, because it's not, it's missing a lot of tools actually. So I check, you have to have Xcode running, it has to be installed, and we are having issues. Yeah. The hard space, yeah. You don't really have, if you don't have data in it, you don't need much space. I mean, 10 gig probably can do the trick for you. But if you start loading data, that's a different story. Exactly, yeah, because, oh, I'm sorry. They're asking to use the mics. I'll repeat the question. The question was how much hard disk space you need. And it's really not much. It depends on how much data you want to keep on this cluster you build. So 5 gig per container? Question. They are stateless, right? So if I install it and test it, and I bring down the environment and go home. Correct. Absolutely, yeah. It's, if you don't change it, you can shut it down, and then when you bring it up, it'll stay the same. So, but they're normally made to be deleted, really. So delete, delete, delete. That's how Splunk, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't repeat the question. The question was, are the instances stateless? And the answer is yes. All right, so the first section of the checks, and again, I spent a lot of time here, is I force the issue. You have to have Xcode, you have to have Brew, which is open source package management for the Mac. Those who are using Mac, you must have that. If you don't, then I had to download PCRE, which is for regex. I do a lot of regex in the script. Then I needed GNU grip, ggrip. The native grip that comes shipped with Macs is not really powerful enough. And then there's a section where I have a bunch of optional packages. So if this fails for you, you can safely ignore it. I do have visualization script that uses GraphViz, which is something different than the functionality here, but we'll deal with that today, and it just help you show the cluster when it's building. And then we go on and just checking for things like we check for if the script have another script running, and you don't want to duplicate the script is not made for multi-user sessions, just single user really. We'll check if you have older version of Docker. Oh, by the way, this is something to be aware of. If you install Docker on the Mac, by default, it comes set with 2 gigs. That's how much memory and CPU allocated to it. 2 gigs, and I'm not sure how much memory. 2 CPUs and 2 gigs, yeah. So the first thing you want to do is just go to Docker preferences and just allocate all available resources for it. Otherwise, you'll not be able to run more than 5 containers before things start going south for you. Again, check for memory, and if you haven't done that, the script will check for that. It tells you, hey, listen, I see you have 16 gigs of memory, but you only allocated 4 to it for Docker. It will actually ask you and warn you. The same thing for CPUs. It'll check if you have a Splunk image. If not, we'll download it for you because you have to have a Splunk image. I have a Splunk image container for each version. It will also create something called Splunk.net, which is something required for Docker communication. Remember what I told you, bringing a simple Splunk container is easy. It's one line. Building a cluster is a lot of work, and that's just the automation that went behind the scene. You have to have valid license file. The free version you download does not allow you to do clustering. The 10 gig developer license that you download does not allow you to do clustering. The 50 gig, if you guys are familiar with those differences, you have to be a customer, then it will allow you to use clustering. Question, yes?
I just couldn't share what you said, but the 50 gig does or does not?
It does, I'm sorry.
It does.
Yeah, yep. Or you can use your production license in the lab as long as you promise not to break the license agreement, but yeah. Again, it will check if you have Splunk D running, and you have to kill that. I can't tell you, things will fail if you don't kill it. Then there's a bunch of other stuff for DNS, which is a future release actually. Right now, I don't have full support for it, but this is an evolving thing nonstop, so you'll see things that not completely built, but the available functionality is rich enough actually. And the last thing I do, I'll create aliases for you. So I'll just say, hey, based on your configuration and the script, I'll say, create 150 IPs. Those are the IPs will be used to bind to the interface. This is the main menu, and we'll show you a demo here quickly. But one of the things, they have cheat sheet in the top. So when I was doing this, I've always find myself getting out of the script and coming back and getting out of the script and coming back to see, to just use native Docker commands, how many containers are running, how many in a pause state, how many exited. So I was getting sick of that, just made a quick cheat sheet for you. Very critical, because sometimes you run a container, it's working, and 5 minutes later it's dead, and you're not aware of it. So you need to be, and like you're wondering why my license message doesn't work, because it died for some reason. So. Also a quick, again, just to tell you how much work been behind the scenes actually, like I need to be aware of your CPU and your OS version, and I change things based on OS version. I change things based on the memory. I also give you a quick reference to what Splunk version currently you're using. So any build at this point is going to go to 6.5.3, and there's the log level. Log level is critical. The default is 3. You can change it, and the more you change it, the more verbose stuff comes out. So if you don't want too much data coming out when the script is building things, just go to 2. And if you want a lot of data, and if you want debug, you can go to 5 and 6. It becomes really unusable at this point. But between 2 and 3 and 4, those are good log levels to use. The first menu option is just a generic configuration, and the reason I'm showing this on a slide, not real life, because just for interest of time. If anybody interested, we can just do it afterwards, after the session here. I can even help you install it if you wanted to. The first option is just generic container build, just kind of an image management. You can delete, add, remove. You can download different images if you wanted to, change the default image of Splunk. Next one is for lunch and learn. Again, it's ongoing thing, but what I want to do is again, just have a simple tool for either your NSE or any person who's delivering classes. Just kind of click a button, bring up the servers, and then what I'm trying to add to is also adding packages if I want to push certain data sets to the user, like tutorial data sets. So I want to give you that option. Then when you're conducting a class, everything that people did is actually logged and coming back to you as a teacher. So you would know what exercise spent where, and there's a certain power to that. So number 3 is what the script is all about, building clusters. And then there's the option 4 is for demos. This is not accessible to customers. It's only for Splunk employees and partners. And basically what it allows you to do, you're wondering, why are you telling me about this? So some of you might be my employees here. But you can download Splunk images, the ES image or ITSI image, and bring it. Don't have to rely on the cloud, just bring it home to you. If one day Splunk decide to release those images to the public, this will be a perfect tool for you. You don't have to learn Docker, just use a script and download those images. So, third party, again, we discussed that earlier, and then everything's just you kind of. This is how the first menu look like, and on the top, again, it's just actually self-explanatory, you know. The just option F, we might not be shown here, but default image, that's a big one, just to be aware of. Just remember, there's an image and there's a container, 2 different things. We have to manage both of them. This is like a provisional tool for Docker, really. So everything you see here, there's a Docker CLI equivalence. I'm just shielding you from it. You don't have to learn it. And sometimes, and it's really not showing because of dark colors, but I actually tell you what command I'm executing in the background. And this, beside the arrow checks, there's tons of arrow checks actually is missing. This is the management section for the containers. Again, you can create, stop, delete, everything else between. And then there's a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff like resetting Splunk, you know, changing the passwords. In the classroom settings, you have 50 containers, people go log in, and then all of a sudden change passwords, and this person doesn't work. So there's an option, you can just click a button, and just all the 50 containers get password reset. So you don't have to go to each one of them. Questions so far? No questions? Is that interesting to anybody? All right. I want to hear a lot more feedback because I rely on the feedback for developing this thing. I have my own idea which direction to go to, but the customers are actually the one who give me the real feedback. This is the menu for building clusters, and again, since this is geared toward education, so I give you the option to build IDXC only, index cluster only, and or search head cluster only, to 2 separate entities as we know, and I'll tell you go figure out how to link them together. So just kind of to learn. Or if you don't want that, you don't want the easy button, I'll say, okay, just build the entire site cluster for me. And that will give you 3 search head, 3 indexers, 1 cluster master, 1 deployer, 1 heavy forwarder, and 1 cluster master, we said that, 1 license master, and then replication factor of 3, search factor of 2. So, multi-site cluster, don't try this at home. Sorry, don't try it at your laptop, because it requires a lot of memory actually. And but in my little Nook box I showed you earlier, and I was able to build 4 site clusters, 10 indexers each, 5 searches each, and it was completely working. Again, granted, no user, no traffic load here. This is just for testing only. This is an example of how listing containers look like. And someone will tell you, like, well, I can just do ps minus ex, whatever, and I just list all the containers. True. But if you do it through the script with the option L, listing, you actually get a lot more definitions. You just get things like the container is running, and it has Splunk running or not, and this is a Splunk version, you know what I mean? And this is the internal IP. So a lot of details that you may not see from the CLI that actually the script will do for you. And if this is running in an EC2 environment, AWS, it will actually go the extra mile and pick up the netted space. So this is added advantage. Questions so far? All right. Sample run. And this is actually running in log level 2, so not many details coming out between the sessions when things are happening. But if you go to log level 3 or 4, you get a lot more details what is the script is doing, what kind of actual Docker commands is being executed. And then I do give you a little stats at the end. This took 10 minutes and like 74 cluster Splunk commands. This really shines, and it's amazing when you have multi-site cluster, when you have like, and then I'll show you, actually it shows right now, if you can see it now. Yep, here's a sample run. With this run, again, building a single Splunk container takes about 20 seconds. Very easy, not a problem. Building a single site cluster with the configs you see in front of you, that's about 224 Splunk commands. That's how many commands you have to type to make the cluster work manually. Again, it's all automated. 18 minutes. 4-site cluster with the configs you see in front of you, 10 indexers, 4 storage heads, that is 624 cluster commands. I was talking to a former PS manager one time, and he was telling me there was a game in the PS team who can build the fastest cluster there is. And they like race to optimize scripts and things like that. And had I known that, I would probably be a winner by now. But I don't know, too late now. FAQ, and I will open the floor for questions after we show the demo afterwards, but there will be a question if we have time. But I get those frequently asked questions, and I want to just share it with you right now. People ask, can I support different Splunk versions? Yes, up to the latest one, 7.0. I just did that actually 2 days ago. You have to have valid Splunk license. People ask me, how do I log into my container? The best practice for Docker is not to make it bloated, just so SSD is gone. And there's a little script called docker-sh, SSH, yeah. And you can just use that and put the host name, capital case, and it'll give you a login session. So it's basically remote exe for Docker. Just remember that, because that's a common question. How do I log in? How do I install this package and that package? Can you run in production? Who wants to run this in production? I'm gonna see. I'm being curious, actually. Who wants to run this in production? Nobody. Good idea. Don't do it. It's because indexers are not meant to expand and shrink. You can expand number of indexers, but you don't want to shrink them. Anytime you have a data storage issue, that's a problem. Search is a different story. Yes, you can expand those and shrink them if you wanted to. So that's really not what it's made for. It's perfect for sandboxing and testing. That's perfect use case for it. Runs in OS X, runs in Linux, and Windows WSL, as I said earlier. I'm not doing Docker Swarm for those who are familiar with Docker. This is outside the scope of this. A lot of people ask me to make it support Swarm. I don't have need for it right now, but I might in the future. Basically, it allows me to distribute this thing into multiple boxes. So the script will expand itself to not just one box, several servers if I wanted to. But then I'll be competing with AWS, and I don't want to do that. All right, can I run this inside a virtual machine? Yes, you just make sure that you know how to do the netting. You make sure you can create aliases on that VM, which is probably a little tricky. Why would you want to do that? I mean, it's like something inside something to get some. Just do Docker natively. That's the intention behind Docker. All right. Quick, tons of videos for Docker out there, guys. If you want to learn Docker, it's just like Splunk. There's no shortage of information out there. The limitation is really you and your time, actually. I want to have a shout out for Ant. Are you here? Is Ant, are you here? He's not here. He's one of our partners from Presidio. He actually did a demo, and his link is right there to a user group. He put Splunk N Box in a single USB stick, a bootable USB stick. So he put Ubuntu. He has an entire instruction how to do the whole thing. So you have USB stick with Ubuntu on it, auto boot with Splunk N Box. So imagine this thing. I'm running around with a cluster in my hand, working cluster. Plug it in any machine, Windows or Mac, and I have a working cluster. It's just fascinating to me. Yeah. So Now, performance is a different story, but, but it's doable. So, all right. Just the takeaway here is just, again, the focus is not to learn Docker or VM. I want you to just focus on learning Splunk, or maybe starting classrooms quickly. Installation about 10 minutes, I said, unless you have issues. And most of the problems I've seen is around Xcode and brew, not installing, out of disk space, permission issues, things like that. I would like to see your feedback coming. If you guys are interested, I would urge you to test it and just tell me how, because my intention is to make it as painless as possible. So anytime someone tells me, hey, I run into this problem because some scenario I wasn't aware of, I want to hear about it so I can just put condition in the code to accommodate that. So. All right, so at this point, we are jumping to a, sorry. I have a recorded demo, and this should shrink the, So first of all, before we go any further, do you guys have any questions? Because this is gonna just go, I'm gonna comment on that. Any questions at this point?
So you said that Linux,
Yes.
is it Ubuntu or something?
I've tested everything in Linux and Ubuntu, but I know several people who actually had it running on CentOS. Yeah, it's because Bash is the same, the kernel is the same, that's all I need. So, and if there's a variation, it's going to be very, very small, tiny variation. But that's the test it on. I'm not really worried too much about like other Linux distribution. Other questions? Can't see you guys, but yeah. Oh, sorry.
Do you have any data sources included which are generating data from it?
Yeah, at this point I don't, and that's a common thing people ask me about. And the reason I don't have it at this point is because I don't want to look bad. I'm just kidding. No, we have something called EventGen, which is open source. Are you familiar with it? Yeah, so it's easily done. I mean, but I will probably, this is one of the things I want to work on because, again, the intention is to make it easy. So I would have a container that actually generate events and download. I did test it. I pushed data to the cluster and it was working for sure. So yes, sir, question. EventGen is, where's EventGen? The question is, it's posted in GitHub. Just search for it and say EventGen Splunk and you'll see it. It's a Python script that actually very powerful, actually, yeah. Questions? You want to set it without internet connectivity? That's a question. You have to download the stuff initially, but once it's done, you don't need internet. Yeah, so. The question, yes, sir, question. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we don't necessarily have a stack of VMs to do that. So if we use that environment, especially on the framework lens itself for doing that, you've already got the ability to create images, then interface, pop it, and then all the other DevOps stuff to that.
You can, yeah. Once an image, I mean, just like I said, you can just do generic images. A question was, how does this, I guess if I understand correctly, how does this work with Ansible and things like that, nature, Puppet? You can have generic Splunk images and then run any scripting language you want to connect them together. That's absolutely doable, yes. Because they're at... yeah, it will be only 10 space, yeah. I mean, you can, but you don't want to expose your Mac outside. I mean, it'll still be a localized environment, so. But yeah, just you can use it as a tool to create generic stuff and then just use whatever other tool to just connect the dots. Every container will have its own IP space, IP address, and every container will have a native Splunk port. Think of it as completely like separate VM, really, so. Yep, and there are questions? Don't be shy. We're all family here, big happy family. No questions. All right, so let me just run the demo quickly here. And let me just get out of this. Can't screen screen. I need to get out of the presenter mode, I guess. All right. So here's a recorded demo online, and I'll have it running quickly, and for the interest of time, just kind of to speed up the... And the left-hand side is the script executing. On the right-hand side is the visualization script I was telling you about. And again, it's not part of this release. It's just kind of side thing, and sometimes it crashes. That's why I have it on the right-hand side. But here's a script running. Again, this is 2x speed, just because we don't have time. We just spent like 18 minutes building this thing. It's not 2x? Oh, sorry, you're right. Thank you. Thank you for catching that. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. There we go. Now let's look at the interface. I accepted it. I'm going directly to the screen, to the menu. I'm going to go directly to building a cluster. And now it's going to start creating clusters. And I run the viz sh script, just on the side. And here, now look at this. Now it's actually building the environment. Before the visualization, it was very hard to explain to people what's happening on the left-hand side. You know, now it's easier to tell them, here's what's happening. And the colors that you see on the left-hand side, actually representation of something. If it's a green line, which means Splunk is running, Docker is running. If it's yellow, which means Docker is running, Splunk is not running. If it's dotted lines, which means the Docker container is completely dead. So we don't have time, do we? 5:15? 4:15? Yeah. I didn't think we'd have enough time, but let me just skip through this quickly. And just kind of jump through it quickly. Because when I'm building the cluster, I actually do a test scenarios. I just killed indexers, I killed cluster master, and just see what happens really when I kill a cluster master. So you think things garbled up, you know what I mean? And the script, the cluster is trying to figure out what's happening, and I was like, it was an eye-opener for me, seeing this in action, actually. So I'm going to skip through this quickly, just kind of, everything is posted in the GitHub. But this will be the final state of the cluster. The green lines means the searchers are aware of the stuff. I actually killed something on the left-hand side to force the problem. But it's interesting to watch. So, on the left-hand side, I'm testing different scenarios. I skipped through the actual build because of interest of time. I just want to get to the play section where I start killing things and how does that impact the visualization. So at this point, I'm killing search head 03. I do have a cluster. It's running. I know it's running, but I'm killing search head 03, which was the captain, and the captain got re-elected. You probably, I don't know if you can see it, a small font, but you can see the captain moved from search head 01 to 03. You know, it's really nice to see actually real life selection process, if you will. Yeah, so hopefully there we go. Now the cluster is back up and again. You have your site cluster master and your deployer. The script on the right-hand side is actually querying the infrastructure real time. It's not looking at config files or log files. So it's really actually real-time interrogation of the state of the cluster. So depending on what time and what stage you actually catch the cluster, the visualization might change actually. So the stuff in the red tells you those components are dead, you know, so. I really want to hear your questions at this point. It's going to take forever to watch this thing, but any interesting questions? Anybody think can use this in their environment? Yeah, it's available. It's called viz.sh. Questions? Yeah, sorry, I can't hear it. See, yeah. It's a process. You have to know Docker. You have to be very familiar with Docker and where to put it exactly in a system. But if you're new to Docker, then it'll probably be challenging. Yeah, yeah. To release, yeah, I'm very aggressive about that. But yeah, yeah. But once you build it, it's in the system. The script will see it. We'll actually make it an option for you to choose from. So, questions? Oh, sorry. Yeah. How does it work with Orca? Orca is different, they have different focus. It's a fantastic group of people, and I love those guys actually. It's an inside development team, and they're focused on a large infrastructure deployment. My focus is sandboxing really. So it's just different focus area, that's all, yeah. And I'm available after the session for a question and answer. If anybody wants to install it and I'll help you, I'll be willing to do that too. So thank you for coming.